I'm concerned about the young folks. That is my major concern.
Workers Independent News puts workers and their unions on the national radio news airwaves every day. To help keep labor's voice on the air, go to laborradio.org.
Workers Independent News made possible in part through underwriting support from the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Visit us online at weactradio.com, WPWC 1480 AM. Visit us online at weactradio.com.
Hello, this is Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and I want to tell you about my new favorite discovery, Yosemite National Park.
Good morning and welcome. Thanks for listening to We Act Radio, and you are listening to State of Play with Maria Roach. That's me, and this is my inaugural broadcast. Thank you so much for listening in. A well-regulated militia. That's what we're talking about today. What is a well-regulated militia? And where is the common sense in discussing this issue? We are going to speak later to the president of Marylanders to Prevent Gun Violence. That's Vinny DeMarco, and he's here with me. But first, who am I and what is State of Play? My name, Maria Roach, and I am a former NBC News producer. And I decided last year something needed to change when it comes to defining what a well-regulated militia is in America. That there are way too many children who are dying at the hands of guns, and there's not enough common sense being used to make better choices, to legislate the gun industry better, to protect our communities. And so we're here today on this very first show talking about that issue. And over the course of the upcoming months, we'll be talking about many other topics in addition to immigration, healthcare, whatever is important to you. Tweet me at State of Play. Let me know what matters to you most. But today we're talking about guns. Last year, I looked at the face of a young man who was gunned down in Sanford, Florida, and he looked very much like my child, my 7-year-old son. That was Trayvon Martin. A week after Trayvon's death, and still no arrests, I decided to write a petition. And I asked Attorney General Eric Holder, something needs to be done, and the Sanford police aren't doing anything about it. And 500,000 Americans agreed with me that it was time for better laws, better protections, that guns seemed to be the law of the land and something needed to change. So I've made a decision that it was time to bring all of the voices of the people who supported that petition and have since supported the other petitions in the wake of the Newtown tragedy, saying that guns are stealing our American dream. So today we're talking about that very issue, and I want to present to you Mr. Vinny DeMarco, who has been working hard for many years trying to bring common sense back to the gun issue. Welcome, Vinny. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Maria. It's an honor to be on your inaugural show.
Thank you.
Really great of you to have me here.
Tell me about Marylanders to Prevent Gun Violence. When did it begin, and what made you decide that this is going to be the focus of your life's work?
Well, I've been working on this issue on and off for 25 years, and Maryland has, over the years, done a lot to reduce gun violence. We passed a ban on Saturday night specials in 1988 and assault pistols in 1994 and limited gun sales to no more than one per month in 1996 under Governors Schaefer and Glendening. Governor Martin O'Malley, in response to the Newtown tragedy, decided that he was going to do what's best for the people of Maryland to prevent gun violence. So he proposed a comprehensive measure which would ban the kind of assault weapons used in Newtown and high-capacity gun magazines that could shoot more than 10 bullets. But he also proposed fingerprint licensing of handgun purchasers, something which 5 states have and which is probably the most effective tool a state can use to prevent gun violence. And when the governor proposed that, a group of us, including many leading citizens in Maryland, decided that we needed to support him. So we created Marylanders to Prevent Gun Violence, and we worked on organizing the public. We held a rally. We had calls, letters, emails going into legislators, and the people of Maryland strongly supported this. According to one poll by Goucher College, 82% of Marylanders support the fingerprint licensing. 68% of gun owners, let me repeat that, 68% of Maryland gun owners support fingerprint licensing of handgun purchasers. And that broad support is the major reason, I believe, why the gun lobbies decided not to try to take this law to referendum. This law is going to save lives and make Maryland safer.
Well, let me ask you, Vinny, because this is what has been so appalling and rather confusing to me when we have this issue and discuss gun violence and gun safety. A well-regulated militia, as the Second Amendment says, and I'm going to keep repeating this because I think in all of the pandering and all of the lobbying, we're missing what the Second Amendment states. And it states a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It's my understanding a well-regulated militia were the men and women who were in Boston after the bombing last week, keeping the city safe. How has that well-regulated militia now entered into the citizenry? There seems to be a massive disconnect, and that the American people is starting to see the truth, that there is something wrong in how the Second Amendment is being applied.
Well, Maria, actually, we at Marylanders to Prevent Gun Violence fully support the Supreme Court's decision that says an individual has a right to bear arms at home. And this law does not in any way interfere with that.
Correct.
The Supreme Court's decision, Justice Scalia's decision in the Heller case, which establishes the right to bear arms in your home to protect yourself, specifically says that states and the federal government are still permitted to ban dangerous weapons and to regulate the use of those weapons. New Jersey has had fingerprint licensing since 1966. And gun owners are doing fine in New Jersey, and they understand the law and they support it. All we're doing with this fingerprint licensing is making sure that people who shouldn't get guns don't get them. And that will save many lives. One of the main ways guns get on the street is because someone with a criminal background asks a friend to go in and get a gun for them to use in crime. That doesn't happen when you have to get a fingerprint license first. In New Jersey, it doesn't happen.
Let's talk about that, because we're talking about the background checks. We're talking about the process to keep Americans safe. We're talking about keeping guns away from people with criminal intent, and we're talking about keeping guns away from people who are not mentally equipped to have a firearm. We're going to bring into the show Delegate Michael Smeagol, who is a delegate here in Maryland representing the Eastern Shore, a little more rural, and we want to hear him discuss why he did not support the measures that were recently passed. We're also going to speak to, later in the show, to our state senator here in Maryland, Brian Frosch. He is in Montgomery County, which is just outside of Washington, and hear why he was such a staunch supporter of the measures. Because I think it's very important to hear both sides of the story and to understand why someone who is a Second Amendment supporter is not for background checks, and also to hear from people who support background checks and why that is good for all Americans. This is not a red or a blue issue. I think politics has muddied the water here. We're really talking about safety and also the Second Amendment freedoms. Do we have Delegate Smeagol? Delegate Smeagol, hi, welcome to State of Play. Thank you for being here for my inaugural show.
It's my pleasure. Good to be there.
Thank you, sir. Let's talk about just your, if you can give our listeners a little bit of background on who you are and why the Second Amendment is important to you.
Well, I'm a former Marine, and I'm a former active duty Marine, and I took an oath to defend the Constitution. Second Amendment is part of that, and I defend every aspect of the Constitution, not just those that appeal to me. So the Second Amendment, in this issue that you're talking about, and in this particular bill, the problem is that there was absolutely nothing done in this bill to do the two things that it promised to do, which were to address criminals with firearms, criminals who go out and do things. When you take their fingerprints, you know who they are. those are the ones whose fingerprints you ought to be worried about, not letting them back into society. When we put in an amendment to the bill to say those who use firearms in the commission of a crime should get no good time credits, no parole, no probation, and should serve their time, they run that amendment and say no. It passed first, and if you go to delegatemike.com, you'll see tyranny in Maryland and how they passed these gun laws in violation of the Constitution, in violation of all procedures, and how they passed them to affect law-abiding citizens. They don't affect the criminals. And in the mental health aspect, where you want to keep people who have mental health problems from being able to get out and you get a hold of the firearms, we put in 3 very reasonable amendments that would have taken care of people with mental health problems by saying the governor should spend a little bit of money on educating the public that there should be no stigma associated with obtaining mental health services. We asked that money be put toward the doctors who go through the Medicaid program and take care of the homeless or people in jail who have mental health problems. They said no to that. And we asked that the governor put some money in the local community programs for mental health so that people who have problems would be able to go locally and get mental health assistance instead of going to an emergency room, getting 48 hours, being given some medication, and put back on the street.
Well, let me say, Delegate Schmiegel, that's a big kitchen sink of issues there, and they all do have their merit. Right now we're looking at how to make Marylanders, specifically we are talking about Maryland, safer when it comes to guns.
That is the issue.
Let me ask Senator Frosch, Maryland State Senator Frosch, who I believe is also with us, just to talk about what you heard from Delegate Schmiegel, and what is your reaction to that?
Hi, Maria. Thanks for having me on as well. First of all, I agree with what Vinny said. What this bill does is it keeps guns out of the hands of criminals. I agree with Delegate Schmiegel. It's important when somebody commits a crime using a gun that they be sent to jail if they do hard time. We have a mandatory minimum 5-year sentence for anybody who does that. That's on top of whatever sentence you might get for armed robbery, for attempted murder, whatever else it is. Mandatory minimum 5-year sentence for doing it, for committing a crime of violence with a gun. What this bill does is it keeps the guns out of the hands of those guys. It stops them before they're able to commit an armed robbery, before they try to kill somebody. It deters straw purchases. You know, if you're a felon and you want a gun and you say to your girlfriend, "Hey, sweetie, here's $500, go buy me a gun." Today, all she has to do is go to a gun store, pass a background check, and come back with the gun. She can put it on the night table, and when the boyfriend goes out and sticks up the 7-Eleven, she could say, "Gee, yeah, it was my gun. I didn't give him permission to take it. I'm really sorry that he did." If she knows that she's got to give her fingerprints to the state police first, the odds are she doesn't love him enough to go out and buy the gun for him.
May I address that?
In states like New Jersey and Connecticut, Massachusetts, New York, the fingerprinting requirements reduce gun crimes substantially, reduce gun deaths substantially, and we're just moving Maryland into that very common sense position.
Yes, Delegate Schmiegel, please go ahead and respond.
Yeah. There were zero people killed in Maryland last year with assault weapons. As far as the straw purchases, I asked Mr. DeMarco at the public hearing that was held on these, could he name one person who made a straw purchase in Maryland in the last 10 years? He could not name one. There may be 6 or 7 that were out of Baltimore City that were gang-related out of hundreds of thousands of purchases each year. So there is no problem. They are looking for a solution that there is no problem. There are no problems in Maryland with the straw purchases. You know why? Because they instituted very strong laws that said you get 1 gun a month that you can purchase. So that's not a problem. But you come out and say that we're trying to prevent something that doesn't exist. Of course nobody wants people getting straw purchases, but they don't exist. Nobody got killed in Maryland last year with an assault weapon. Everything in this bill goes toward the law-abiding citizen to curtail their ability to exercise their Second Amendment rights, and that's what's wrong with this bill. The things that would do something that I outlined for you, they don't want to do nothing about. And with respect to trying to purchase firearms, many people try to purchase firearms who are felons and should not be allowed to, and they don't prosecute them. why don't you prosecute the ones who go in and try to make the straw purchase? If you're trying to stop straw purchases, punish those who try to do it. There are thousands that go in there and nationwide, and they don't prosecute them. That's where you start.
That's a very valid point. That's Delegate Michael Schmiegel, and we're here on State of Play with me. I'm your host, Maria Roach. Let me posit that question to Vinnie DeMarco, who is with Marylanders to prevent gun violence.
Well, thank you, Maria, very much, and I'm really honored to be on the show with Senator Frosch and Delegate Schmiegel. As you can hear, they're two of the best advocates for their positions in the Maryland General Assembly and really do a tremendous job. And basically, experts from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health outlined how, when states have fingerprint licensing systems like we just enacted, they have lower gun deaths because it prevents people from lying about who they are to get a gun when they're a criminal, and it deters these straw purchases. And top police leaders in Maryland, including chiefs of police, state's attorneys, came and said that is a significant way that guns get into the hands of criminals, and we can stop that, dramatically reduce that with handgun purchases having to get a fingerprint license. New York City has dramatically lower gun death rates than Maryland. 85% of the guns used in crime in New York City come from out of state because people can't go to a gun store and do a straw purchase. In Maryland, 60 to 70% of the guns used in crime are bought in state, and that is what this law is going to reduce dramatically. That's why 68% of Maryland gun owners support the fingerprint licensing. On the mental health, and I respect Delegate Schmiegel's concern for people with mental health issues. I know he's worked on this issue, but Maryland this year did something dramatically to help people with mental health issues, and that's agreeing to the expansion of Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act, which is going to provide mental health services to tens of thousands, over 100,000 Marylanders who don't have that now. So we are making progress on those fronts. And what I want to emphasize here is that this measure that Senator Frosch led the way in getting through the Maryland State Senate is going to save lives in Maryland.
Great. Thank you, Vinnie. Coming up later in the show, we will speak to Lori Haas. Lori is a parent of a survivor of the Virginia Tech shooting massacre that was just a little over 6 years ago. And we also will have Cliff Schechter, who is an advocate and has worked very hard for the last few years working on exactly these policy issues that we're discussing right now. Let me ask you, Delegate Schmiegel, and if you could just break it down for our listeners, how do tightening up the background check system through the fingerprint mechanism that is in place in this bill, how does that infringe upon the rights of a responsible gun owner?
I've outlined for you it does nothing to the criminals. They don't punish the criminals. You don't put them in jail.
Well, I would look at the law and the order as two separate. So now you're talking about the punishment, but what about catching it proactively?
You just told me. I just told you that there were no straw purchases. So Mr. DeMarco gets on and says this is going to significantly decrease what doesn't exist. So if there are no straw purchases, how does going into law-abiding citizens and telling them we're going to put these additional burdens on you help to take care of something that doesn't exist? Nobody was killed in Maryland with an assault weapon last year. If there were no deaths, why do you need all this? Mr. DeMarco, do you own an AR-15?
I do not, sir.
Okay. Have you ever shot one?
I have not.
Okay,
well, let me ask you.
How can you legislate about something you don't understand?
Let's have State Senator Frosch weigh in here, because are we limiting this conversation to assault weapons? I think we're looking at a broader issue.
No, we are, and the Newtown massacre occurred on December 14th of last year. It's now 4 months later, and there have been 99 gun deaths in Maryland since the Newtown shooting, just in Maryland. There have been about 3,500 nationwide. There is the equivalent of a Newtown shooting every day in the United States of America. 25 to 30 people are killed by guns across this country every single day. And in Maryland, nearly 100 people have been killed by guns since the Newtown massacre. So, we probably can't stop it, but we can certainly reduce it in our state. And the bill that we passed and that Governor O'Malley will sign shortly will do that.
There are two problems with that. First, they count when a police officer is stopping somebody in the commission of a crime and they fire and kill that criminal as they were raping somebody or robbing them. They count that as a gun death. They should not be counted as gun deaths when you stop the commission of a crime. Secondly, where are the numbers on how many people, law-abiding citizens, save other people's lives, save their families' lives by using a firearm? They are 10 times the amount of the people who are killed by a firearm. They don't want to tell you how a firearm stops a crime and how it prevents a crime from occurring. Where are those numbers? And then you cite a report from the Bloomberg School of Health. Isn't that the billionaire who is anti-Second Amendment? Why would that be the only support that you can put out for your position is a person who is against the Second Amendment, who is a billionaire, and you say that support is somehow supposed to be independent?
Well, let me just interject, if I may. If you look at just the response of Americans, if you look at 92% of Americans want universal background checks. 89% of Republicans want universal background checks. 74% of NRA members, who are 5 million members, which is really a small percentage of Americans, but they want background checks. So my question to all of you gentlemen is, isn't this just common sense and responding to the will of the people?
You can waterboard numbers to say anything you want. 5,000 people showed up in Maryland that were against this gun bill. 34 people showed up in favor, yet they put out that 89% of Marylanders were somehow in favor of this gun bill. Where were that 89% when 34 people show up in favor?
1,000 Marylanders came to Annapolis for our rally, representing the over 80% of Marylanders who support this.
You had 300 people at your rally.
There were 1,000 people there representing the 80% of Marylanders who support this. And on the assault weapons, you know,
they weren't paid to be there.
Maryland had an assault weapons ban. America had an assault weapons ban for 10 years, and a limit on high-capacity gun magazines, and that significantly dropped the use of these weapons of mass destruction and killing people. The use of them went up after the assault weapons ban expired. These laws will save lives.
The FBI does not keep statistics on the use of assault weapons. There is no statistic you can cite to that supports that position. Yeah. You can throw it out there, but there is no support for it. I've asked you for it in public hearings, and you've never provided it.
Well, I think that's a good point that you bring up, Delegate Schmiegel. And let me posit that to State Senator Brian Frosch. The FBI does not keep those statistics, but wouldn't the opposite be true, that they are hamstrung when it comes to maintaining statistics of this nature on guns?
They are indeed. In fact, the NRA and its supporters have effectively prohibited the United States government from keeping statistics on gun violence and gun deaths. The last time there was a study done on a nationwide basis about gun deaths was in the 1990s, and or done by the United States government. And what it showed is that people with guns in their homes are 3 times more likely to experience a homicide in their home, and 5 times more likely to have suicide in their home than are homes without guns. Now, that has nothing to do with anybody's Second Amendment rights. It's just a fact. And
not a fact.
It is, and it's disingenuous to say that the FBI doesn't have these statistics, or that any other government agency doesn't have them, because it's the NRA and their supporters that have prohibited the United States government from keeping and distributing that information. It's a public health issue. There are 100,000 people in our country that die at the other end of a gun every year, sometimes by accident, sometimes by suicide, and sometimes by malevolent intent. And we, since the 1990s, haven't been able to study it as a public health issue and figure out what works best. But we know, because of the laboratories we have in other states, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Jersey, that fingerprinting, gun licensing, or permit to purchase, whatever you want to characterize it, works in reducing gun deaths.
And we'll have to stop there. And I will say thank you so much to Maryland Delegate Michael Schmiegel, who represents the Eastern Shore. That's District 36. Thank you so much, Delegate Smeagol.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much, State Senator Brian Frosch. Brian Frosch represents Montgomery County, just outside of Washington. Thank you so much for your input, and thank you so much to Vinnie DeMarco with Marylanders to Prevent Gun Violence. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would love to have you all back on again, because I think that this is a conversation that first is very important. It's important to hear both sides of the issue, to look at those who are for the Second Amendment's protection of that, and see that we are that we're not protecting the Second Amendment in some of these laws, and not dealing with the mental health issues, and also looking at those who support tougher background check systems and implementation. So thank you so much. I hope you'll join me again. You're listening to State of Play with Maria Roach. We're about to take a brief break, and we'll be back with Lori Haas, who is with the Coalition to Prevent Gun Violence, to Stop Gun Violence, and her daughter was a victim of the Virginia Tech shooting massacre. We'll be right back.
I'm a third grade teacher.
I'm a school bus driver.
I am a parent.
I am a teacher's aide, and I agree to be identified
as a caring adult who pledges to help bullied students.
I will listen carefully to all students who seek my help
and act on their behalf
to put an immediate stop to bullying.
I will work with other caring adults to create a safe
learning environment for all the students in my school.
In my school.
In my school.
In my school.
I'm Dennis Van Rokel, President of the National Education Association. Help us create safe, bully-free learning environments for all students. One caring adult can make all the difference. Be that adult and take the pledge at NEA.org/bullyfree. Adults have the power to stop bullying in our schools.
It starts with me.
It starts with me.
It starts with me.
It starts with me.
Bully-free. It starts with me.
Visit NEA.org/bullyfree. A message from the National Education Association.
Let me tell you who to blame. Blame the boy lying at your feet, his body oozing life through the hole in his stomach where the bullet tore him apart. Blame him for challenging you, for not looking away and for not backing down when you pulled out the gun. Blame your mother for bringing you into this world when she was but a kid herself and for dragging you up, not bringing you up. Blame society for not giving you hope. Blame your father for not being there, the man who looked after himself instead of looking after you. Blame the gun in your hand for making you a target, for making you more likely to be picked on. Blame the dead boy, blame your mother, blame society, blame your father, blame the gun, blame anyone but yourself for not being strong enough to put down the gun, to break the cycle.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Visit us online at weactradio.com.
Welcome back. You're listening to State of Play, and I am your host, Maria Roach. In the first half, we were speaking to State Senator Brian Frosch, to State Delegate Michael Smeagol, and to Vinnie DeMarco with Marylanders to Prevent Gun Violence. Come and visit us on Twitter, State of Play News. Send us a tweet, and we will share it on air next week. And listen to us on weactradio.com. Thank you again. We are coming back now with Lori Haas. Lori is the mother of a survivor of the Virginia Tech shooting massacre and is an advocate with the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence. Lori, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Maria. I'm glad to be here.
Tell me, on April 17th, exactly 2 weeks ago, there was a vote in the Senate. And for some, it was a day to celebrate, and for others, it was a day to perhaps mourn and regroup. What was that day like for you?
It was a long day, knowing that the vote was coming in the Senate, in the afternoon on Wednesday, trying to, evaluate what was happening, looking at the reality of the playing field and looking at the reality of, we could count votes going in, before the actual vote. We were not expecting to come out with 60 votes. I think that the notion, that we lost, quote unquote, is, clouded by the fact that, we have the filibuster that, warrants an impossibly high threshold to get work done in the Senate. We won. We had 55 votes. Under a different set of rules and a different set of circumstances, we would have a background check bill right now. So, we have to work harder. We have to work smarter. We have to, do what we can to, flip five votes, and we've got to make it work.
Lori, if we'll step back a little bit and tell our listeners what exactly that bill entailed, and what did that bill mean to you as the mother of a young woman that you nearly lost due to gun violence?
Well, we know that the the Toomey Manchin amendment was what we were voting on. We've never actually even voted on the original bill, the Schumer bill. That could come back, but on that day we were voting on the Toomey Manchin background check bill, which was a compromise. It didn't suit me. It didn't go far enough. Schumer's bill is a nice, clean bill. It does a background check on everybody. That's what I think this nation needs. I think that's what this gun violence epidemic warrants, and it would have made a difference, if we had done background checks, and had a thorough background check system long ago when my daughter Emily was shot and injured. What we are trying to do is stop dangerous people from the easy access to firearms that then go out and harm people.
And let me make that clear, Lori, that this wasn't a debate for or against passage of the bill, but this was rather a debate to debate on the bill. Am I correct?
We had to reach a 60-vote threshold to move the amendment. That's what the debate was on. That's what the vote was on. These were a series of 8 different amendments, 4 put up by the Democrats and 4 put up by the Republicans, and this was a vote to move those amendments, and they didn't get moved. And yes, it would have resulted in debate further down the road if we had moved those amendments, but it didn't happen. Background checks, make a difference to Americans. They make a difference to the amount of carnage and the amount of death. In my daughter's situation, she was shot twice in the back of the head. The shooter, in her situation, his records weren't in the system. It's a gaping, hole in the record-keeping system. The Schumer bill would do 2 things. It would improve the type of data and the amount of data that is put into the background check system to catch people like the killer at Virginia Tech, but it would also do a background check on every buyer and all sales. That does not include family, and there isn't, a few exceptions here and there for family members or estates, things included in wills. But, what we know is in states that have closed the private sale loophole, gun deaths are going down. Deaths by intimate partners has been reduced 38% in those states that have closed the private sale loophole. That's 38%. That's a big chunk, and that's a lot of women who are alive because their partner, who probably had a domestic protective order against them, couldn't buy a firearm because we had closed the illegal market to them.
Let me ask you, Lori, and our viewers, You may have already seen the photo. If you haven't, there's a beautiful photo of you and your daughter, Emily, celebrating her wedding. What, in the minutes after it was determined that this amendment was not going to move forward, I imagine was an emotional time. What was that like for you? What were you feeling? Where were you?
Actually, I was in the gallery of the Senate watching the vote, and I was sitting next to Pat Maish. We were among, almost 24 family members and survivors of gun violence from Tucson and Aurora and Newtown and Virginia Tech. We were all together, and, we were just appalled and disappointed and angry. Even though you might know something is coming, you can't anticipate your emotions. You can't anticipate your feelings and how raw, some of that will be. Pat and I, we all stood up, and Pat hollered, "Shame on you," and I echoed her sentiments and hollered, "Shame on you." And actually, frankly, shortly thereafter, Pat and I were detained by Capitol Police for breaking the rules about the decorum that is required in the gallery. But that was just a momentary hiccup, I would say, in my journey to push for and advocate for responsible gun laws. When you have the kind of data that I just mentioned, that when you close the private sale loophole and you say, 30 gun deaths by intimate partners of women goes down 38%, why wouldn't we want to do that? Why don't we want to save lives? That is really the chilling question that just haunts me at times. I can't imagine that people are somehow putting convenience ahead of the ability to save lives.
Well, the irony of you being there as a mother of a gun victim with Pat Maish, who stopped a killer, being detained for breaking decorum when you're fighting for the safety of Americans is quite startling. We're going to bring in Cliff Schechter now. And Cliff is a strategic advisor to Mayors Against Illegal Guns. That's a group that is led by Mayor Michael Bloomberg in New York. He's author of the best-selling The Real McCain and co-founder of this radio station, We Act Radio. Cliff, thank you so much for joining us on this inaugural broadcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Maria, and I'm really glad to be here for the inaugural broadcast. Good stuff so far.
Thank you. Thanks. Lori was painting a picture for us on the vote to move forward the bill to provide universal background checks. Tell me, when 90% of American people want this to be passed, what happened?
Well, I think, what happened is something I can tie in with a opening statement here I'd like to make anyhow, which is I wish that our members of Congress could have just 1/100th of the courage that Lori and Pat have. Lori and Haas and Pat Maish are heroes for what they did and for standing up and having the courage after what they've been through to speak out. And if you compare what they've been through and what they're willing to do to get sound legislation while these cowards, and there's really no other word for them, hide and slink in the shadows of Congress and try to avoid taking tough votes because, oh my gosh, they may have to actually explain a vote to somebody that the NRA tries to distort. It's sad, and really that ends up becoming the answer to your question. How can 90% of people support something? How can 55 senators, as Lori pointed out, support it? How can if you look at numbers, 75% of NRA members support it, 87% of gun owners support it. I can go on and on with all this. You really, this bill. I remember some people made some comparisons. This was more popular than Mother Teresa. Seriously, in polling. I mean, if you do polling long enough, and I did polling in the past as a profession, you don't find anything that has 90% support, ever.
It's hard in these days and times to get Americans to agree on anything, but nearly unanimously, Americans are agreeing for universal background checks.
That's correct.
Losing 20 school children who were supposed to be safe in an elementary school was a horrific wake-up call, and we spoke earlier to a Republican delegate here in Maryland, and I understand his concerns about the mental health issues and making the crimes if you use a gun in the commission of a crime, making the penalties tougher, absolutely. But it seems like there's a need for a proactive response, Lori. When you are on the Hill and also working in Virginia, what kind of feedback are you getting from Republicans as a mother of a gun violence survivor?
Well, often what you just mentioned, they want to flip the switch and talk about something else. They want to come up with an excuse for why the gun violence problem is happening, and invariably it's often the mental health problem. Persons who are diagnosed with mental illness are not the problem. They are not causing the violence in this country, and as a matter statistically, far fewer persons with mental health diagnosis become violent than if you look at the percentage of the general population who become violent. So let's be clear, the mental health situation in this country needs attention. Services need to be greater, access needs to be more broad, costs need to be brought down, we need to provide more beds, we need to provide, more care and concern. I'm not suggesting anything to the contrary, but mental health diagnosis and the mental health treatment providers and those persons who are clients and patients and who have been diagnosed are not causing gun violence. Disturbed, deranged young men who have not been identified are causing mass shootings, but everyday gun violence is caused by the easy access to firearms. A recent study out of Johns Hopkins gave clear evidence when surveyed persons in prison who had used guns in violent crime, and surveyed, 80% of them got their guns in the illegal market. We've got to stop and dry up that illegal market. We've got to do a background check at a gun show. We've got to do a background check online. We've got to do a background check on classified ads. And casual, stranger-to-stranger sales. That would help dry up that market and keep firearms from dangerous people. We cannot just take a broad stroke and suggest that mental illness is the problem. Could we do a better job of identifying dangerous people? Yes, that's what we need to do. We need to look at who are dangerous, what are the indicators of violence, and how to wrap our brains and our treatment system and our law enforcement system around identifying dangerous people. There's studies out there that link alcoholism to use of firearms, and it is much greater, that link, than mental health diagnosis or a mental illness diagnosis.
And you're listening to Lori Haas. We're here at State of Play with Maria Roach on We Act Radio, and we're talking about the gun violence issue here in America. Lori is the mother of a survivor of the Virginia Tech shooting massacre, and we're here with Cliff Schechter, who is a strategic advisor to mayors against illegal guns. Cliff, let me ask you, in the work that you're doing with Mayor Bloomberg's group, you're working with it's a nonpartisan group. You're working with Republicans and Democratic mayors across the country. What are you hearing from the mayors, and how does that represent what their constituents want?
Well, I think a lot of them are outraged. And again, this is a very bipartisan organization. Let me be clear, I'm giving you my view of things. I'm speaking for me right now, but having interacted with many of these mayors on a personal level, it's not just Democrats. Frankly, Mayor Bloomberg obviously is an independent, so it couldn't just be Democrats. But there are a number of Republican mayors. In Connecticut, the bill that passed there, Republican legislators were key in the support for passing that legislation. There is bipartisan support in a lot of places for this. Obviously, 90% doesn't mean it's just coming from Democrats. The issue is getting these sort of, whatever you want to call them, dead-enders, these people that don't understand that the demographics have changed, that the Ascendant Coalition now is the one that elected President Obama and supported gay marriage across the country and supported even legalizing pot in 2 states. Younger people, it's college-educated people, it's single women, it's African Americans and Asian Americans and Latinos, and all of these groups are disproportionately, by far, in favor of many more gun safety measures. They're all massively in favor of an assault weapons ban, a limit on the number of bullets you can have in a magazine, and that is, and no disrespect, but the older, more rural, whiter males that are supporting this gun legislation disproportionately are supporting gun rights, and I put that in quotes, which is the right of anybody to buy a gun anywhere, no matter your criminal background or whatever. They're a shrinking part of the population, and they'll continue to be. They have disproportionate influence in the Senate because Montana or Wyoming has 580,000 people, and California has 38 million, and yet they each get 2 senators. That's obviously a problem. On the presidential level, however, when it comes to putting together an electoral coalition, these guys are burying themselves. And so, how does that play out overall? I think as the demographics change more, those that are supporting this are a little bit ahead of their time. It's kind of like where people were on gay marriage a few years ago. But this is going to become, the number of households, let me put it this way, that owned guns in the late 1970s was over 50%. It is now under one-third. It's about 31, 32%. And all the trends are heading that direction. So we're going to get there, and we're going to get this legislation. The only question is, how many more people have to die before we get there? And it is, again, to end where we began, very bipartisan. It is Republicans, it is Democrats, it is independents, it is conservatives. When you do these polls, certainly when it comes to background checks, and frankly, most of the groups I named under the assault weapons ban, you'll find a majority too, as well as limiting the number of bullets in a magazine. So this is common sense stuff. This is not, draconian going to people's houses and taking their guns away, which no one's trying to do. And
that's a very good point that you're making, Cliff, that we are talking common sense. We're talking about common sense on the issue of gun violence in America here at State of Play with Maria Roach. We're listening to We Act Radio. Thank you so much for joining us. And I apologize to all of my listeners, to you, Cliff, and to Lori for a little bit of construction noise in the background. But Cliff, that you make a very great point. Lori, I would like for you, if you wouldn't mind, ending it just as in the equality issue, and there are a few Republican senators and legislators who have come out in support of equality because they now have a child or a loved one who loves someone of the same sex. You don't want the personal touch to be what motivates someone when it comes to gun violence. What would you say to those who are out of touch with what the rest of America is demanding right now?
To clearly begin to listen to their constituents. Cliff could not be more correct. I'm outside the Beltway. I'm in Richmond, Virginia, and among my friends, among my neighbors, and my book club, and all of my group of friends, and I live in Eric Cantor's backyard. Literally, couldn't be too much farther from his house. Women, men, children, young, old, no matter your demographics, they do not understand why we don't have background checks on all buyers. They don't understand it. It's almost like this is just, such common sense that it's utter ridiculous, behavior on the part of legislators who won't support it. So I think there's going to be a wake-up call at the polls. I think there will be a big wake-up call in 2013 in Virginia. We have statewide elections in November, and we'll be working to make certain that those who are running for office in Virginia, hear what we have to say. And I think it will be reflected then, and I think it will be reflected in 2014 if we aren't able to get these legislators to move on this issue.
And I apologize, we do have a few more minutes. Cliff, I'd like to pivot back to you. For our listeners who are just joining us, we are speaking to Lori Haas, who's an advocate on gun safety with the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence. And we're also here with Cliff Schechter. Cliff Schechter is a strategic advisor to mayors against illegal guns, and he is also the co-founder of We Act Radio. And you're listening to We Act Radio and State of Play with Maria Roach. Cliff, let our listeners know, what do we do now? There's an event that's happening tomorrow. Can you share a little bit about that, please?
Sure, and that's what we do. We do things like we're doing tomorrow. Tomorrow we're having a march on the lobbyists who, let's call them the mercenaries, the guns for hire, if you will, for the NRA, who put profits ahead of the lives of our children and the destruction of our communities. And we're no longer going to let them operate in the shadows. So in McPherson Square at noon, I hope you'll all be there. I will certainly be there, flying into town for it, in fact, because like Lori, I live outside of the Beltway. But we'll have a great lineup of speakers. Sadly, a couple people like Lori, whose family members have been harmed by gun violence, a number of advocates on the issue. There's rumors Michael Moore will be there for all who would like to see him. And we will be making it very clear that who the lobbyists, the lobbyists for the NRA are, what what companies, the names of the individual lobbyists, what we need to do to call these guys out and stop them. And then we're going to march down the street while holding banners and signs and pictures of Nardine Jeffries' daughter. Nardine's daughter was shot in a drive-by shooting and killed in South Capitol, and she wanted us to use these photos to make a point. And we're going to go to each of these lobbying firms and deliver it along with a large Publishers Clearinghouse type check from the NRA, because in the end that's all they seem to care about. But we're going to make sure they know that we're watching them, and we're going to let other clients of theirs know, many, from Google to Amazon to Cedars-Sinai Hospital to the American Psychological Association, who share lobbyists with the NRA, to let them know that how can you share a lobbyist with this group, with this extremist right-wing group that is getting our children killed. And we'll see what they have to say about that. But again, the thing here is this is how you get involved, because we are no longer going to let the people that get our kids killed hide in the shadows. And so I invite everyone to join us at McPherson Square in Washington, D.C., noon tomorrow. Please be there. We would love to have you.
Great, and We Act Radio will be there, and I will be there as well.
That's right, Maria. You'll be speaking, which will be fantastic.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, our pleasure. We couldn't have it without you, with the fantastic work you did on Trayvon Martin, that terrible case, and publicizing that and letting people know what happened with these terrible and racist, frankly, stand your ground laws. So Maria will also be speaking. That is correct, and this is an important event. It's going to be the first of many. I promise you all that.
And I invite everyone to send me a tweet, State of Play News, on Twitter. Let me know what you want to see happen, whether you're a supporter for gun rights or whether you're an advocate for gun violence prevention, or whether you're listening to this and really want to know more so that you can make an informed decision. Send us your tweets so we can share it on the air, answer your questions. There is room for debate. Let's move this issue forward. Let's not stagnate. We want to thank Lori Haas for joining us. Lori, we are delighted that you were able to celebrate your daughter's wedding despite the horrific events of 2006, that you were able to just enjoy your daughter longer. And we hope that your work will help other Americans enjoy their families longer, and that there will be less gun violence as a result of the work that you are doing. Thank you, Lori.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be here, Maria.
And Cliff, we want to thank you so much for the work that you are doing, and for Mayors Against Illegal Guns, and for having me here on State of Play on We Act Radio. It's just an honor to work with you, and thanks again for inviting me to have this show and this forum.
We love having your voice out there, Maria, and as we love having Lori's out there. So let me say, same back at both of you. I'm really, just honored to even share a radio show with both of you with the great work you've done on this issue. So thank you, and let's all keep up the good fight.
Thank you, and thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an exciting day. We were able to hear from both sides of the story, and we will continue this conversation. You're listening to State of Play with me, your host, Maria Roach, here on We Act Radio. Listen to us at weactradio.com. Send me a tweet on Twitter at State of Play News, and we'd be interested to hear your thoughts and share them on our show. We're here every Wednesday at 11 a.m. live, and you can also listen to us on weactradio.com. Thank you. Have a good day.
One, two, three, four.
You're in tune to WPWC Dumfries, Washington. Up next, The Union Edge with Charles Showalter.
listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Visit us online at weactradio.com.
The Rana Plaza building, about 30 kilometers from the capital, Dhaka, was filled with 2,000 mostly young women workers. They were making clothes for companies such as Walmart and Disney. Bangladesh's garment industry has been plagued with fires and other accidents for years. In November last year, 112 workers were killed at the Tazreen factory near the site of today's disaster. A major reason for the horrendous safety conditions is pressure by multinational garment retailers to produce goods even faster, even cheaper. Scott Nova